Hello everyone, Books with Banks back to continue my monthly series wherein every episode I go over briefly my impressions and major takeaways from reading two of Shakespeare's plays that I've never read nor seen before. In episode 1, I covered Two Gentlemen of Verona and Titus Andronicus. In episode 2, I covered Twelfth Night and Antony and Cleopatra. And today, I'll be talking about the comedy Love's Labour's Lost and the tragedy Coriolanus. Before going much further, if you enjoy this series and if you want to support my channel and just more Shakespeare content on YouTube in general, if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. But without any further ado, let's get into it, starting with the comedy Love's Labour's Lost. I went into this one pretty blind. I haven't watched or read much analysis of this. I've never seen a production. Once I started reading it, I recognized pretty early on, I got that feeling of, oh, right, this is the one I've heard about where the guys all take an oath not to court or beat with any women for the next 3 years, swearing off love, basically. I had that floating around in my head somewhere that one of these comedies would eventually be about that, and I was pleased to recognize that pop up in this one. So that's basically the premise. It's a king and 3 of his closest friends and other nobles, and they have taken an oath to dedicate the next 3 years of their lives to academic study and to self-improvement with no distractions, including no romantic distractions. One of these other 3 men, Barone, I think is the pronunciation. Barone, I think, is maybe the most interesting character, at least of these 4 guys. He's somewhat reluctant to agree to the oath because of the clause about no women. He's very down with everything else, like the fasting and focusing on studies, but it takes a lot more convincing from his friends and the king to make sure he upholds every part of the oath, at least initially. But then, of course, right after they take this oath and swear off women, a beautiful princess from France and 3 of her friends are all coming by, and they hope to be welcomed at court. Because of this silly oath, though, the king can't let his kingdom see that he's caving already. So they don't let the visiting princess or her friends, they don't let any of them stay with them. Instead, they set up tents out in a field for the ladies to stay in. Naturally, though, each of the 4 main men fall in love with one of the 4 main women, and vice versa, and the men go back and forth struggling with the need to profess their love, but also the need to stay honorable and uphold their oaths. Rosalind, the woman Barone falls in love with, she's actually the wittiest and most interesting of the princess in her group, I think. And Barone and Rosalind actually kind of gave me the feeling of a more immature Beatrice Benedict situation from Much Ado. That later play has a much better dueling wits love story, but Barone and Rosalind do stand out in this one for trying to do something kind of similar. And even though they probably have the most lines between them, there's still a lot of page time given to the king and the princess, to the 2 other pairs, and then to this whole kind of side cast of characters. And all the side stuff really just seems like a bunch of characters and their servants posturing and trying to sound more academic and more well-learned and more the better poets and writers and scholars than the others. In this group, we have a visiting Spanish soldier who seems to be the most self-assured, but ironically and kind of fittingly the weakest when it comes to wordplay and like the more sophisticated references the others are always trying to make. Later into the play, there's a brief mix-up with one character having to deliver 2 letters, one from that Spanish soldier to a woman he loves, and another from the aforementioned Barone to Rosalind. The letters get mixed up, but actually pretty quickly sorted out. So this comes into play at the end of a longer scene in Act 4, where first Barone walks out and he's talking about how much he loves Rosalind, but he has to keep it secret from the boys so he doesn't get harassed and embarrassed for breaking his oath. But then the king shows up, and Barone quickly sneaks away to hide and to spy on the king. The king is saying much the same thing, but about the princess. And then the next guy shows up, and now we have the king running away to hide, but spy. And so both the king and Barone are separately spying on this 3rd guy, talking about how much he loves his match. And then, of course, this repeats with the 4th guy. But then what's actually pretty cool here is that the scene unfolds in reverse. The third guy comes back out and kind of reprimands guy number 4 for talking about how irresistible his love is. But then the king comes out and he's like, no, no, I heard both of you. Don't you're not allowed to judge him for having said basically the same thing a moment ago that you said. You're both on the brink of breaking your oath. And then Brown comes out thinking he's kind of the end of this comedy bit, and he gets to play the most self-righteous of all, talking about how he heard all 3 of them talking about how they wanted to break about how they wanted to break their oath. And Brown gets to act all pompous and say things kind of along the lines of, you all convinced me to take this silly oath, but I've remained the most true to it the whole time. But then here's where those love letters kind of come into play. The messenger brings the letter. Brown tries to run away before he's found out to be just as love-struck as his friends. The king calls out for being in such a, or calls him out for his being in such a hurry to leave. So Brown stays, but he takes the letter, recognizes it as his own to Rosalind, and he tries to rip it up. The boys stop him, read the letter, and they all realize how they've been fools and how they cannot resist how much they love these women, how they're all kind of in the same boat. So then in the end, the guys put on a show for the women. The women trick them by wearing masks and each other's kind of gifts and favors that the other guys have given them. They swap things around to confuse the guys. And the guys wind up kind of whispering sweet nothings and professing their love for the wrong women. Everyone has a good laugh. They all realize how silly they've been to even take such an oath in the first place. But then a couple of interesting things happen that do deviate and kind of help this play stand out from what we might expect from a Shakespeare comedy. First, with some last news and the accusation that the Spanish soldier has gotten his lover pregnant, the soldier challenges his accuser to a duel. They're about to fight. So now we have the expectation of some action at the end here, but also still the expectation that the 4 pairs of paramours might make wedding proposals or some such thing. But curiously, Shakespeare throws a wrench into, I guess, both expectations. First, a messenger arrives from France to interrupt the duel, stop any of that action from happening, and to tell the princess that her father has died. So now all the women speak to their men and tell them they're going to take a year to grieve and to wait to do anything romantic, anything like getting married, because they need to be respectful. They need that 12-month grieving time for the death of the king. So now no one gets married, no one gets killed, but they all seem pretty content in the end to realize how silly they were with this oath to swear off women in the first place. The message being that love and the cunning of women are 2 such kind of irresistible, powerful forces, and try as they might, these men were helpless to resist those powers. All in all, I enjoyed reading this one, though I'm not sure beyond the original intriguing premise and kind of that fun bit of stage action and scene design with all the guys spying on each other. I'm not sure there's all that much that stands out here. I do feel like the whole idea and point of the play is a great one that would fit well within like modern day attitudes around these strange fraternity oaths and this mindset of, oh no, us men can't be attracted by things like love and women, we have to be serious. And these guys taking themselves way too seriously, only in the end to realize that the women always did and always will have a great deal of power over when and where and how the guys fall in love. It can't be helped, nor should it be treated as a distraction or anything like that. That really does seem to be the pretty progressive kind of attitude of the play. Love should be celebrated, even in cases, and especially in cases, where everyone's being so stuffy and trying to be more poetic and more academic than each other. It's also kind of like Shakespeare making fun of the like modern day like bros before hoes idea. But yeah, aside from those few things, I really enjoyed about the play and its main story. There's a bit too much distracting scenes with characters not all that involved in the oath part of it. And it's just a bunch of characters constantly talking about who's actually the cleverest. Also, there's a bunch of poetic and rhyming verse here, which is fun and lovely to read, but sometimes it got a bit caught up in the sing-songy feel of it, and I was starting to lose the point of these debates or character interactions. Yeah, all in all, a lovely play about love. I'm not sure I'll be rushing right out to find an adaptation of this or scouring journals and reviews to get other takes on this one, but definitely there is something to enjoy here. But now on to this month's tragedy, and we have probably my favorite Shakespeare I've read since Lear, which I read a couple years ago. But that could be some recency bias. I do love some of the Henry VI and The Tempest, all of which I've read since Lear. But no, this month's tragedy is Coriolanus, a long epic play all about politics, war, classism, exile, betrayal, but also, as dense as the character work is, and as much as there is, I'm just so eager to pick apart with this one, I also found it relatively easy to follow along with. So much so that even though I'm not too familiar with pre imperial Rome or like the pre Augustus or the like kind of several BC centuries of Rome, even though I'm not as familiar with that era, Shakespeare made it really easy to understand the political dynamic and just the historical context, which might sound weird to people who've only read a couple of Shakespeare plays, and maybe you find that the bard often makes things sound a little more complicated, just with how he used the language and how he writes his stories, and how people kind of complain about Shakespeare's difficult to understand. So it is kind of funny that this I found was very clear and very easy to understand. Maybe part of that's too that I've now been reading quite a bit of Shakespeare lately. But no, I do think Shakespeare does a really nice job at clearly representing what's going on in the political situation, and kind of what that time period was like in Rome. But before getting too far with my kind of gushing, what's Coriolanus actually about? So you have this well-respected general and nobleman, a member of the patrician class, named Caius Marcius. He's very serious and proud, and he thinks very highly of his fellow patricians and the highest-ranking military and political leaders of Rome. But he's very condescending and rude and dismissive when it comes to the plebeians, the poorer classes, or the rabble, as they refer to the masses on several occasions throughout the play. Anyway, the Volsci, a neighboring people near Rome, are attacking a city, so Caius Marcius joins the consul Cominius and another general, and they battle the Volscians, including their leader, a man named Aufidius, for whom Caius Marcius has a great deal of respect. And then, after a Roman victory, where Aufidius was not killed, importantly, Caius Marcius is given the honorary surname Coriolanus after the town or the city that they just saved. He is given a grand hero's welcome back into the city, a war hero's welcome back. And this is interesting. This is a point that the Folger edition that I read, it's a point that they make sure to note is often, or a scene they make sure to note is often produced with a lot of fanfare in big productions. But also a point that I want to revisit and compare, maybe contrast with something else later on in the play. So hold on to that thought, the idea of a hero and their welcome returning to Rome. Anyway, the patricians and even at first now a lot of the common citizenry of Rome all seem to think it makes sense that this war hero Coriolanus should join Cominius and become his second consul, leading the Senate of Rome. They want Coriolanus to go talk to the people and to get their goodwill and approval, but also to basically flaunt his battle scars and say, look how brave and mighty I am. But Coriolanus is extremely uncomfortable with this. He's too proud on a personal level to use his scars as a political argument, but also he doesn't really give two you-know-whats about what the common people think of him. He really disdains and kind of disregards the plebeians and any opinions they might have. But at first he says enough, does enough to get their approval. And then we have these two tribunes, these kind of political situations, representatives for the people to the Senate. And Sicinius and Brutus are their names, and they hate how much Coriolanus is rude to the people whom they represent, so they start talking with the crowd, and they point out where Coriolanus's relatively harmless speeches to them could actually be interpreted as extremely condescending. They point out how Coriolanus doesn't care at all about the common man, and so then the people take back their vote of approval. They revoke it, basically. And obviously, Coriolanus is furious. His wife, mother, and other patrician friends have to talk him into groveling and asking forgiveness so that he can still win back the people and still be appointed consul. He's in the process of doing this when someone from the masses, someone calls him a traitor. So he flies off the handle. They all settle into hating him, at first calling for his execution, but then calming a bit and saying, no, we'll settle for him just being banished. In exile then, after his banishment, Coriolanus finds his war rival, Aufidius, leader of the Volscians, with whom he fought at the beginning. And now the two of them have such great respect for one another as brilliant combat partners and warriors that Aufidius takes Coriolanus into his armies and they start attacking Roman settlements and lands. So now Coriolanus has sort of become what the people hyperbolically accused him of before. Everything comes to a head when Coriolanus is about to lead an attack on Rome, an attack that could be successful. His former patrician friends try to visit him in his camp outside the walls, but but he turns every one of them away. But then the Romans send his wife and mother, and Coriolanus's mother, Volumnia in particular, she is the one able to dissuade her son from attacking the city. Meanwhile, Aufidius is jealous and worried about how charismatic and likable Coriolanus has been with the Volscian army, so he plots his rival-turned-ally's assassination. After returning from not attacking Rome, Aufidius has Coriolanus assassinated. But one quick note, Volumnia, much like her son earlier in the play, she is also given a hero's welcome of sorts when she returns to Rome after having stopped her son from attacking the city. And I find that mirroring really fascinating. And the edition I read has no notes about how grand or extravagant her entrance has ever been staged. But I can imagine directors could do some really wonderful things with both scenes. Not to mention the performers, whoever's playing Coriolanus and his mother. But there you have it. That's what this play is about. But why did I like it so much? Well, I think I love this one because similar to plays like Julius Caesar, it gives no easy answers. Sure, we feel like the tribunes are a bit manipulative and hasty with how they invigorate the masses to call for Coriolanus's execution and then exile, but at the same time, the tribunes are right in that Coriolanus would likely do very little to stand up for the common people. So in a way, they're protecting the masses. They're sort of the heroes, even though they're then hated and reviled when it seems like their manipulations are about to bring this feared war hero back around to kill everyone. At that point, the people are ungrateful of the tribune, saying, why did you ever convince us to exile this great hero? Now you've doomed us all. And honestly, I feel like this is a play with a pretty absent morality. The patricians are shown to be kind of fake and condescending and hypocritical, while the plebeians are shown to be dithering and quick to anger and irrational reactions. No side is presented in a particularly good, moral, or like favorable light. And I just love that kind of uncomfortable feeling that Shakespeare lets us sit inside for the whole play. A pretty long play, too, I should add, but I actually think it flies by. And the protagonist, Coriolanus, this morally ambiguous and condescending war hero / politician who really isn't ready for politics, there is just so much to untangle and interpret and reinterpret about this man. I can only imagine how much fun it must be for actors to try and embody such a complex character. That complexity here has inspired me to now look at similar characters in my favorite films and other books and even video games from a totally new angle. Also, I think even though there's only a couple, all of the scenes with Coriolanus and his mother, Volumnia, are the best parts of the play, especially the one near the end where she talks him out of attacking the city. It's just a super powerful dynamic where she herself suffers from a similar prideful character flaw, but she recognizes that her son's pride is beyond normal and beyond saving him. Really fascinating stuff, and I highly recommend Coriolanus to any Shakespeare fans or anyone in the mood for a political epic set in ancient Rome. But that should do it for both the comedy Love's Labor's Lost and the tragedy Coriolanus. Before I go, I'll do a quick ranking here of the 6 plays I've read this year since starting this series. Last place, Two Gentlemen of Verona, the first comedy I read. 5th place, Love's Labor's Lost, the one I just read for this video. 4th place, Titus Andronicus, the first tragedy I read as part of the series. And then 3rd place, Twelfth Night, easily my favorite comedy so far. In 2nd place, Antony and Cleopatra. And then in 1st place, Coriolanus. So right now it is at the top. And yeah, there you have it. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll keep doing this series for another few months. Next month, I think I might tackle Merchant of Venice and Timon of Athens, but we'll see what mood I'm in and if any of that changes. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.